Calling to order the Thursday, August 22nd, 2019, regular meeting of the Wheeling Plan Commission. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we do the roll call, just a quick introduction. My far right, we have our new Plan Commissioner, Amy Thompson. Welcome. And on my far left, we have Mike Sprague. They just were appointed on Monday by the village board, and we welcome them. Roll call, please.
All righty. Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner Blanova.
Here.
Commissioner Creech.
Present.
Commissioner Kalis is here. Commissioner Yudnick.
Here.
Commissioner Sprague.
Here.
And Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
And Chairman Johnson.
Here.
All righty.
Wow, long list now.
Oh, man. We're back.
Any changes to the agenda, Ms. Nyes?
No.
No changes. And we had no citizens' concerns and comments. So we'll move on to the consent items. Docket number SCBA 19-26, Senju America, 1200 South Wolf Road, appearance approval of a freestanding sign. And docket number SCBA 19-27, Asteroid Precision, 1085 Chaddock Drive, appearance approval of a wall sign. Oh, that's the new spec building on Chaddock. Okay. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Creech, Commissioner Kalis?
Commissioner Creech.
Yes.
Commissioner Kalis votes yes. Commissioner Blanova.
Yes.
Commissioner Yudnick.
Yes.
Commissioner Sprague.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes. Items for review. Docket number 2019-18, which was continued from August 8th, 2019. Village of Wheeling amendment to the comprehensive plan for the station area plan.
The Village of Wheeling seeking an amendment to the comprehensive
Go
plan.
ahead.
Was I jumping the gun?
Go ahead.
Okay. Seeking an amendment to the comprehensive plan for the Village of Wheeling Station Area Plan to update the entirety of the station area plan. It's public hearing information.
Anything to add? You, Steve?
Yes.
Okay. Take it
So
away.
as the Plan Commission is aware, the station area plan update has been presented a few times in front of the Plan Commission in draft form, primarily through the summer. At the last meeting, the last full discussion on this was in June 27th, where we obtained some additional feedback and input from the Plan Commission. That information was taken, and the final draft that we have tonight has been prepared for your consideration, taking into account, again, that input and some further revisions by the village's consultant on the station area plan. This is the final draft as that's being presented tonight. So as it is final, the staff is looking for a recommendation from the Plan Commission on this. Staff recommends that there be a positive recommendation on this, but again, we understand that there may be some new elements to this, and so there may be some additional questions, but the team at Farr and Associates will go through the final draft version here tonight, and feel free to ask any questions and of staff or of the Farr team.
All right, gentlemen, it's all yours. Just for the record, state your names and business address.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Doug Farr, president of Farr Associates. Our business address is 53 West Jackson, Chicago, Illinois. Good evening, members of the Plan Commission, and welcome new members. So what we thought we would do is just give a quick overview for the new folk, and I think the rest of the Plan Commission has seen it multiple times. I'm sure there will be questions in the slight revisions. Steve, in terms of advancing this, does this wheel turn, or how does this work? There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So there were three consultants that we were the prime consultant. We had two sub-consultants, Sam Schwartz Engineering, which does traffic planning and traffic engineering, and then BDI, Business Districts, Inc., which did sort of market analysis, and that was Bridget Lane. And we were all here for a 3-day charrette where we basically moved into City Hall and didn't leave, and just worked all day and all night, and presented to Plan Commission on the night of the third night back last year in November, I think it was. So life's a lot of life has happened since we started this project. But anyway, so those were the 3 team members. Ultimately, we've worked on probably a couple dozen TOD, transit-oriented development plans with different municipalities. And one of the key recommendations we are making here is that the plan, the subject, we'll talk about the content of it in a minute, but basically we have witnessed that the level of support provided by the village, the level of involvement is proportionate to the quality and speed with which you get a nice station area. So the more you put a shoulder into it, the quicker it comes and the better it is. So in the executive summary, we laid out these sort of 3 levels. The lowest level, simplest level is regulate, which is to adopt a new zoning ordinance that would govern a kind of higher quality, more walkable development in the greater station area. The second level is called coordinate, which is there are a number of parcels, Tim will show those to you in a minute, where the access would be highly improved if there was a coordinated easement that would allow sort of parking and so on to take place across multiple parcels. And then the third level is participate, which is we hold that back for the rare condition where, but for the village's involvement, say in assembling, purchasing a property or buying or selling a property, it would never sort of crack the nut to make a good outcome there. So those 3 levels, hopefully they're really clear. And we've laid out sort of where we recommend each of those levels be applied. We have 8 sub-areas. Let me see if I can get this. Do you all see the same thing I'm seeing here?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Wow, technology, I love it. I love it. Let's see, so there are 8 sub-areas, which are all illustrated on this map, and I think Tim's going to take you through them. There's analysis, if I want to just pause and say, were there questions up to this point in the report? Because we can just do questions in waves, or would you rather hold them till the end? What's your pleasure? Steve, do you have a preference?
No, if we have questions as they go through, I would say just,
Yeah, blur.
I
please
had
bring them
some
up.
points, but I thought I would wait till the end.
Well, yeah,
personally.
wait for the appropriate time, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we
yeah.
passed pages where I've already had some comments,
Oh.
but I thought I'd just do it in general.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I was going to ask Tim to just lead you through some of the 8 sub-area plans.
And if you don't mind, what I think I'll just do real quick for anybody who may be watching that isn't familiar with the history of this project is this is a pretty important page. This is what we call the existing conditions analysis. And just to point out that what we have is a very nice beginning of a town center. We've been calling it a pedestrian-friendly village center because the town center is sort of taken already. But in any case, one thing that came out of the survey was that there was broad support for the idea that that there should be a walkable sort of core near the station area, but there's challenges to that because of several things that we point out here. Dundee Road is a bit hard to cross right now. It's not the kind of street that necessarily has a lot of strength on either side of it in terms of being able to cross. Also, the train tracks are a physical barrier east and west. And what this analysis is pointing out that it seems like the natural place for the station area to expand to is towards the west. And this is just something that we've touched on a little bit in the past, but this page kind of makes it explicit that seems to be the case in the recommendation. And then down here, the idea that a lot of these sub-areas are basically like what we call super blocks. There's not a street network that allows choices of how to get one place to another. So in the end, they all relate to Dundee Road. Almost the only thing is Dundee Road, where they have to have their own curb cut connection that way. So that was just an important thing that I want to point out. One last part here, just to point out, because it came up last time, was a little bit of a critique of some of the recent developments that aren't necessarily, they're beautiful in a million ways, but not necessarily reinforcing a walkable urbanism because they're set back from the street behind surface parking lots. And this was just a little bit of an analysis of the code that got Uptown 500 to be that way, that in the end, it either had to be set back 25 feet or it had, at a minimum, the code says 25 feet or equal to the height of the building. That's a 68 foot tall building. So it was going to be set back at least 68 feet anyways, so the rational decision was to go ahead and put a surface parking in front of all that. So this is all just to say that one of our recommendations is, in the end, is that while you're waiting for some of these priority projects to be implemented, just be careful not to allow things to happen that are moving in the wrong direction, just to be careful on that. So moving now right along into the recommended plan, this is a hybrid of the 3 concept plans that we presented earlier. And so for each sub-area, we took the plan that we thought made the most sense, whether that was the coordinate or participate or regulate scenario. And most of them will look familiar to those of you who saw it before, except for the one here, what we call the Ozinga site. This is actually a new idea that, if you recall, last time we had a Top Golf and we had like a dog park and different things. And this, like that diagram showed, is probably the most natural place for the town center to expand into. And what we're showing here is basically another one of these multi-story residential buildings. Seems to make a lot of sense there. But there could be mixed-use commercial along Dundee up here. And also very important is to create a connection, a pedestrian connection at the very least, from Dundee down to the train station. Just to point out, in case it wasn't already clear, like imagine you're coming from the west and you want to get on that train. Basically today what you're doing is you're walking probably past the train tracks, down through the town center, through a parking lot, here, crossing back over just to get there. Wouldn't it be nice if there were a more direct connection here? And what we're showing is even the idea in one of our concept projects here, if this new connection with the Buffalo Creek trail actually happened, suddenly these 600 units of housing here could be directly connected in a pretty cool way all the way down. And so just start getting into each of these sub-areas. As Doug said, the regulate is kind of our lowest level of involvement, and all this really depends on is a form-based code. And the form-based code says a couple important things. This orange bar here is what we call a build-to zone. We like the idea of what we're saying here. We're recommending that in the form-based code can really study this and get into the details, but more than 50%, let's say 55% of each property's street frontage should have a building within that zone, not a parking lot, not a building set way back, but something that a pedestrian would be able to see through ground floor windows, transparency, that, and then importantly, that there would be cross-access easements somewhere on the property that allows cars to get in and out without having to have curb cuts all over the place on here, and to make their parking lots viable. Basically, what we want to do here is flip the conventional suburban sprawl layout where you have parking in the front and then the building in the back, flip that, get most of the building on the front and most of the parking in the back, recognizing the commercial properties do want to have enough of what we call teaser parking to make their businesses viable. We always try to show a site plan that has some of that as well. The other thing that you'll see a lot of times in these sub areas is we go ahead and draw a drive-through, but we draw a drive-through that doesn't put the drive-through up against the sidewalk like you see in some of these examples, just to illustrate that, yes, it is possible. We know that the driver's side is on the left and all these kinds of things, but if you're careful on the site plan, you can do it. So we're, in these hypothetical layouts, we're trying to show how that's possible. And then lastly, in a lot of these, you'll see this feature that could be sort of an open space that has fountains. I know there's already a few really cool fountains in Wheeling, so maybe that could be a theme that happens along in the station area. This one, in the next sub-area, we say that this is coordinate because it would probably take a bit more coordination between the different properties. Now, this former Kmart property is a shape like this, where this is carved out. But if they could share this access here and also continue this street through here, it breaks up what is now just a big, massive superblock into something that's more of like a traditional network of streets and blocks. The buildings along Dundee in general we're showing as probably 2 to 3 stories, mixed use, ground floor commercial, upper floor either offices, maybe residential, and in the back here this is shown as being residential properties like townhomes. Moving on to the most challenging block sub-area of all is actually this one, because it's so shallow that there's not a whole lot of room to do this kind of breaking it up into smaller blocks. And the other thing that's tricky here is that they're all, the parcels are kind of, there's different ownership in each one of these things. But with the end in mind, the top one here is eventually we do want to have basically an alley across the back. But until that happens, we do have to allow each property to have their own access onto Dundee, or else they're going to be landlocked. So this is something that this would develop incrementally over time and eventually get us to that. Just an interesting thing that I'll just point out to illustrate a point. If you remember in the document, and this is in the appendix here, we have these case studies or scale comparisons case studies that hopefully paint a picture of when you see something like down here, this building in the corner that has that kind of circular thing. What is that? Well, there's a building just like that. You can look at it and understand better what it is. Well, we also presented a building, this kind of concept for a mixed-use building that's pretty small, that fits on a small property that could have a ground floor business and a few apartments above. And just to point out, there's a optometry building here that without actually having to expand their property at all, you could fit that exact same business into the ground floor and have an apartment on the back on the ground floor, an accessible apartment, and have 4 apartments above, and go take that thing to a bank and say, I want a 30-year fixed-rate home loan for a home. And believe it or not, you can do that. So just to point out, like, there's these opportunities for even local folks who want to become, small-time developers in their own town. It's kind of an exciting opportunity. So believe it or not, that fits there. And here's another exciting one. So in the Lynn Plaza, we actually, during the charrette, met with the owner of this, and we're all getting excited about this idea of connecting through, basically cutting a hole through the building and connecting across Buffalo Creek. We don't want to call it Wheeling Drainage Ditch anymore, like the Google Maps does. Let's rebrand this thing into something very nice. It's a great amenity, or it can be, and cut through here, and maybe even put some kind of new architectural element that is that's iconic, that's a focal point that draws you from here all the way up to here. And so that is what that idea is about, and I'll just try to move a little more quickly. So this one is you're seeing this for the first time, folks. So here it is, a residential building here instead of a Topgolf or instead of a dog park or anything like that, that again has this connection, this right-of-way through the village-owned property here, all the way down to the train station, and then a mixed use on this. This actually is all for sale right here. It's about 3 or 4 acres, all for sale. This is just depicting what could happen if there was a mixed use building that holds the corner, puts the parking in the back, and then allows that kind of access through the back side of it, like is what we would recommend. And then down here, this is probably more industrial buildings. This is, if you guys know Lurvies in Des Plaines, this is their buildings put on there just for scale comparison. So maybe it's something like that.
What is that business?
Lurvies is a landscaping.
Okay.
It's a really great sort of like they have this would be like the greenhouses and then the stones and all these kinds of things. But that just for scale comparison, that's their 3 buildings put on the site. Seems to fit pretty well, and it seems like it'd be sort of compatible with the kind of industrial uses that are there. But just to back in general, we're not making specific recommendations generally about what businesses should go there, unlike the 2004 stationary plan where the market analysis was very much in that vein. In this case, Bridget always advised that rather than try to have a crystal ball and predict exactly what businesses the village should attract, instead make a form that is compatible with a pedestrian-oriented environment, and that it can be flexible to either accommodate things like offices or apartments on the upper floor and ground floor commercial as well. I'll get back to this because this is actually one of our high priority projects. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then finally, the property right across the street. I'm a little bit turned around, but right across the street here. Right. So this is exactly the same as everybody has seen it the last few times. But what's exciting about this one is that we think that it can be done in phases, incrementally, so that just using property that's already under common ownership plus the village-owned property here, which is why it's called participate, because in this case, in order to pull this off, that property would have to get sold to the folks who own all of this, and then eventually the rest of that gets assembled, and the thing mirrors, and it becomes the ultimate vision, like that. So I can stop here and take questions, or just kind of move right along. What do you guys? Okay, so Doug, I think I'm going to hand this back to you here.
So this is on page, boy, that text is too small.
30,
Small.
38.
38. So on the left there, sort of 5 steps to implementation. So I think it's important that we've invested this time and you have invested the resources in developing this plan, that we have a clear path forward. So step number 1, adopt this plan, which I think is what Steve is hoping to get a recommendation in favor of that. I think it's a clear plan. I think it's been vetted a number of times. I'm sure there will be questions, but we hope to answer them tonight. Second is create a form-based code. So Tim's referred to it a couple times. It's just a better version of zoning. It's pedestrian-oriented, and it would apply in the station area. And so we hope that that happens next. It could happen in your next budget year, ideally sooner rather than later, so that, as Tim said, we avoid bad things happening that work against the plan. Third is market this plan, which is, who's the gentleman that showed up to the charrette that does marketing now? The guy. Marketing sites here. Brain fart from last November, but somebody here that does marketing of the land. Steve, do you remember? I'm hanging myself here.
We have John Malanofi with our Economic Development Department. Is that who you're speaking with?
Thank you, yeah.
Director.
So to have a plan, to have it adopted, and then get the word out that there are opportunity sites here, and to share. This is really meant to be very developer-friendly and very kind of to make clear the vision and then have the regulations align with it so that the private sector can show up and do what they do best. So, but if they don't know about it, they won't do it. So fourth is to implement the high priority projects. Tim will lead you through those in a minute. There are 7. They're listed on the right-hand side. And we could also talk about, sub-priorities in that. Some of them suggest themselves what goes first. Some the market will decide and so on, but those are all good projects. And then, number 5 is basically don't mess it up, guys, which is as plans sometimes take a little while to adopt, codes take a little while to adopt, things will come in, over the transom or under the door, whatever you want to say, and the regulations won't be right yet, and the plan might not be adopted yet, and you'll be asked to make kind of judgment calls in that kind of gray zone. So that's really what number 5 is, which speaks to doing number 1 quickly, and doing number 2 quickly, and we'll minimize number 5. So that's, hopefully those make sense. They're pretty clear, and I'll ask Tim to do kind of an express version through the high priority projects.
So this first one is probably familiar to most people, but it's a very important site, and the Plan Commission for years now has recognized that it's an important site, and for that reason has basically rejected a lot of plans that have come through here for this. And I think that one of the important things to come out of this project was to paint a vision for this thing that would give a little more guidance to the owner of this, so that when they come back, that it's something that is that has the right look in mind that the village is after, to sort of give them a little more of a target. And like I mentioned before, this can be phased in a way that we think makes a lot of sense. This is very important. It's something that we showed in the draft, and I know there was questions about well, that's a good idea, but how does it get implemented? So here we are with more details about the process and even the street sections of how this would get pulled off. And we even got a little more aggressive, whereas before we had proposed 2 crosswalks, one just west of the train tracks at the high point there, and then one that actually aligned with our new multi-use trail here to allow it to connect across the street. Well, it turns out that I think this is a pretty good way to wrap your head around how far these crosswalks are. It takes about 5 minutes to get from one place across Dundee to the other. And then the other thing that's tough about it is Dundee's a very wide road, so even if you wanted to ignore the idea of crosswalks and just take your chances and cross, there's so many lanes of traffic going both ways. If there was a pedestrian refuge island in the middle, it would cut down the distance obviously in half and do that. But in any case, we think there's the opportunity to actually break each one of these blocks up with a mid-block crosswalk. And this is showing how that's done, and the process of how to deal with that with IDOT, and the costs as well. I think it's about $25,000 each one. And I can go ahead and answer, in case there's a question, that would be a village cost to do that. But I think it would dramatically change the walkability of Dundee and the relationship between stuff that happens on one side and the other. And if we're trying to better connect, this great new development that may happen on the north side and the things that happen at Lynn Plaza, that would be a way to help do it. The property, the Collins property, the former fireplace showroom and that, the village owns it. It's something that it's not in great shape, but yeah, some people think it has character. I think it has some unique character that may be worth preserving and still have some value. So this is just showing some examples of other places where things have been done. Some Mundelein in this case, they used the side of a blank building to paint a mural that sort of is that brands that area. you can see how that might work here. This is a project in St. Louis that used to be a rundown old gas station, and it just got fixed up and turned into a place that is now like beloved in the community. And it has a lot of character because it has that historical charm. And Bridget pointed out, I think, when we were here for the charrette, that the new developments are wonderful. They're beautiful, very high quality construction, but it's nice to have a bit of historic buildings or things that have like a gritty charm as well, to kind of mix that in for what she calls like the authenticity. You know, there's some appeal in that too. So she said that there was that old building that I guess was like a haunted dog food factory, and she's like, please don't tear that down, because that's gone now. So just, you know, maybe some of the other ones this, and then even like the Lynn Plaza isn't in great shape. I noticed that there's a facade improvement grants and stuff available. Maybe they could do some of that. The facade could use some improvement. But some of these things, rather than being torn down, maybe could be preserved. The idea of branding a place and embracing a certain charm or a certain character, that's what this is about. We had showed some examples before of developments when we were doing scale comparisons. One in Durham, North Carolina is called the American Tobacco Entertainment District, where in this case, they left this old water tower and they left the old smokestack and put that right in the middle of the public open space. And here at the Santa Fe rail yards, they left the old water cistern thing that they used for the train tracks and just left it there. And now it kind of brands that place, makes it special. And I thought to myself, well, what if, you know, the old Ozinga, I don't even know what to call that thing, but if you did redevelop this as a residential project, maybe you could keep it and have it as something that ends up being actually a focal point. That visually connects the town center that we have now with the future stuff that happens over there. Because right now, if you walk in, if you enter the town center and get as far as you can go without having to either turn left or right, at least in a car, and you turn right, you do catch a glimpse of that. And to have that powerful sort of like feature, that iconic architectural feature at the end, there may be something to that worth considering. All this is just to say that if someday this plan goes out and somebody decides to come in as a master developer of this area and has an idea, just keep this in the back of your mind as plan commissioners as you're critiquing it, if you think there's anything to it. This is the idea of that Creekside Trail, the Buffalo Creek Trail, not the drainage ditch, and just pointing out that this idea, we talk about TOD as transit-oriented development, but there's also something that's pretty hip these days, trail-oriented development, and evidently it has great economic development potential. And Wheeling already has so many assets that could be connected from this, all the way down to the Des Plaines Trail, to the park, and the park up here, going right through the middle of the downtown. So that's something we think should be giving serious thought and consideration. And then finally here, the Lynn Plaza, I thought, well, maybe again with the rebranding, Plaza del Arroyo, a little bit more interesting. This is that tower element at the end that draws you from the south side of Dundee up to, what's going on over there? Well, there's a beer garden, or there's some kind of outdoor dining or something that may happen there on the creek with that new bridge. And then finally, parking regulations. At our last meeting, we talked a little bit about when Kelly from Sam Schwartz was here, the idea that the village may want to look at their parking regulations. Right now, it seems like, especially in the station area, maybe asking for more than is necessary, and that you could open up land for more valuable, uses than parking. So this is just the final recommendation to consider doing that.
Any questions, anyone?
This ends the formal portion of our presentation.
Commissioner Thompson, any questions?
No.
Commissioner Creech?
Nothing.
Commissioner Yednek?
My turn?
Go for it.
Yeah, I had a lot of stuff. I really like the new format. It's much more of a recipe for implementation. I think we were asking for that quite a few times. And I think it lays it out better. I'm assuming that we would try to be using something like this as a marketing tool then, working with the developers. With that being said then, there's still a lot of errors in it and typos that I think need to be fixed up. And your version now was a little bit different than what we had. Like, we never had the Lynn Plaza in the pages that you just went through in the parking. And if you go all the way back to the beginning, let me see where I was at. The very first picture on page, I guess it's 6 and 7, you're labeling it the Fox River. We don't live near the Fox River. We're on the Des Plaines River, up in the top corner on your picture. So I mean, part of it that I would like to make sure that we get things correct, so that if we're going to send it out, we don't look like fools when we have errors on it. The other thing too, then in the first paragraph on the project overview, you're talking about that we have readily available access to Illinois 59 and Illinois 64. We're not really near either of those. I think you're talking about Illinois 45 and 83. But because later on in the document, you do reference Illinois 45 and 83. And then also, I think Milwaukee through here is maybe 21, or is it still 45?
It's both.
It's both through
It's
here?
mostly 21.
Where River Road joins Milwaukee, that's where 45
Okay,
joins.
all right. Yeah, then the one thing I did was curious that a lot of our pages that we were looking at showed to be updated for the 8/22 meeting, but that's already been taken care of. Because then your version had those renderings. There was also, and I don't know, this is on page 18. There was a point here about with 3 projects that include nearly 900 new apartments and XX square feet. Yeah, it's still XX square feet. I didn't know if we meant to call that out, that something like that should be corrected. If you want me to typo this, I used to be a proofreader in high school, so I pick up a lot of
No
that stuff.
kidding.
I'm a real anal about it too, unfortunately.
It's good, thank you.
Yeah, and there were other areas that I saw. There was some split sentences, like there was a word that was, I think, performance or something, started on one line and then something, or potential, I think it was potential. It was PONT, and then Enchel was on the next line down. It just, some of those things I'd like to go through a little clearer. If we're talking just about the final draft, and I'd like to make sure. The other one, then I think, on page 42, where you're talking about the crosswalks, where we have the new crosswalks, you have a call out now for 4, but then the right side on page 43, you're only really calling out 1, 3, and 4, and where is 2? I don't know what the proposal is for 2. You're proposing 4 new crosswalks, but your diagram on the right is only calling out 1, 3, and 4.
Yeah, and first of all, just in case you wonder why I'm not writing this down, I'm going to go back and rewatch the video, so that way all the things that you already said, we're going to catch those for sure, without a doubt.
Thank you.
And then to explain this one, so what's happening here is that on the west, and we'll correct all the numbers, but just to explain for everyone here, the idea why there's actually 3 different drawings for proposed new crosswalks here, is that the ideal crosswalk that we like to have is like this, but this only works on the east side of the tracks because the curb-to-curb distance is wide enough to allow that. On the west side, it's not wide enough to have the island as wide as we want it to be. So it may be possible. It's a thing that we have to work through with IDOT to do that. But this is the preferred scenario. But if this isn't possible, then this is an alternate to that, where rather than having the mid-block island, you have to have this this actual signal on here. It's a lot more expensive and not quite as good. But either one of these are the way that we would deal with crosswalks on the west side, and then this is how we would deal with crosswalks on the
Okay,
east
yeah, I
side.
understand. So yeah, I understood that the existing was the top left, and then you had 2 proposals for location 1, that was near the tracks. But then, what I'm saying is that then you've got the existing for 3 and 4 and the proposed for 3 and 4, but you have 2 is not called out, I guess, so is the proposal for 2 the same as 3 and 4?
We gotta make that more clear.
Yeah,
I
then
think what we'll do is probably replace the stars with numbers, and then have like numbers over here somewhere, so that it's really
So that
crystal
we
clear.
reference our proposal for the other ones, yeah. I'm trying to think. Yeah, so like I say, that you have updated several things. Also page 53, another typo, you're referencing the June, unless this has been corrected, June 27, 2018 meeting, but that was actually it's no longer page 53, go another page on, what your appendix, at bullet point 062, that was actually June 27, 2019.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I think I had was, you're still proposing Topgolf, and I'm not a fan of Topgolf, but I don't remember how that came out when we did a survey pool, if we were agreeable to the Topgolf in that one facility. But now you're actually calling out that Collins building something different than Topgolf, so that was where Topgolf was going to end up being in that lot. So I don't know if we said that we didn't, I wasn't a fan of Topgolf. I thought some people were, some people weren't. I thought we did a poll. I don't recall.
Yeah, I think that it seemed clear to me at when on the 27th when I was here that since some people liked it and a lot of people didn't, that wasn't what we were going to recommend. You know, we talked about the fact that there would be the high fencing up there and the lights.
Right.
And so, you know, it's in the appendix.
Yeah, it is
just as
still
a
in the
reference,
appendix.
but-
It still has the pictures of a proposed option for that lot.
And really, the appendix is just kind of like a historical artifact at this point.
Okay, all right, I wasn't sure if that was the case. But again, just some typos. I want to present a good face for the village if we're going to send it out, give it out to people, and they're going to say, you don't live on the Fox River, all that kind of stuff. If we can clean up some of those things, but I really, really like the new format. I think it's much more we were asking last time of give us a recipe for implementation, and I think this is very clear. I especially like the bullet point of, you know, if you don't have the formal process in place, try to informally implement as you go along, you know, number 6 on your, you know, don't screw it up bullet point. That I think is very helpful guidance. So that's all I had. Thanks.
Well, one thing I was just going to point out too, because I've meant to mention it before, is we're always, all along, have been planning on doing a couple of professional renderings, like photoreal, really cool, like marketing renderings. We didn't want to pull the trigger on that until we knew that we even were illustrating the right thing that was approved. So if the commission decides to recommend this plan and things don't change much, then we were going to have a couple of renderings done that would be used for marketing, the really sexy stuff. And here were just a couple. We did a couple in-house just mock-ups that I was going to share with you. A view, sort of an overall view that stitches together the existing and then the new. Here's a view from the south, or a view looking west, just to consider. And we can check in with Steve and see which is preferred. We could do ground level views of one of the high priority projects, you know, so just something to keep in mind.
The other question I guess I did have then, I like the concepts and it's all great, but how do you work with it if you have a developer that says, well, I want to change that fountain or I want to change that driveway? You know, they're still conceptually they're creating a courtyard, but maybe they had a different view of the courtyard. I mean, I'm assuming that's planning, that's village board. We're going to say, we want a courtyard there. If you come up with a neater plan, you know, show us what your options are. I mean, we're not casting this in stone for the developers. Okay.
Right. I would just say that the adoption of the form-based code would govern where buildings are placed and how they address the street or the frontage. And that'll be the most sort of regulated part of this. So the other part of it, as you know, once it's adopted as a sub-area plan, is the land use is the sort of first kind of cut, you know, is the proposed development in compliance with what the land use plan calls for. I don't think, like this drawing, I went to this page in particular just to show that kind of fountain there. Mm-hmm. You know, design a good fountain, but this is just a placeholder of a concept. Because this one's really much more about the kind of phasing and how
Right.
the west part can go and then the village-owned part and then the east can come later. So yeah, that's,
But our guidance
don't
might
build
be,
this. Don't build this.
maybe they might even want a fountain feature. Maybe they want a landscape courtyard with some little tables and umbrellas, you know, but so we're not forcing the developers into a cast in stone design.
One way to think about it too is if the form-based code happens, and let's go back to that property, really all the developer would be on the hook for is to make sure that they have the minimum amount of building frontage in that orange zone, and that they have a cross-access easement along the back like this that aligns with this intersection and this intersection. And then they can, you know, they can do whatever, and there's probably 100 ways to do this, better ways to do it, but it's probably helpful to paint at least one hypothetical scenario, just to paint a picture, but definitely 100 other ways to do it that still follows that.
Okay.
And I was just to comment on this for the two new commissioners, this was a site because I think the developers come to the village a gazillion times and was very eager to get something that resulted from this process that the village would view favorably. One little detail that I'm really happy with that came out of this particular site plan, you can see how we've arrayed townhouses in a kind of double crescent. And this is, you know, re-envisioning the creek. It would never be the Fox River. never be the Fox River. But envisioning the creek is something you give a little room to, so that there's a kind of bank and the potential for a little bit of landscaping. It's not just a ditch. You give it a little more space. And so that sort of setback off that facility would be something that could be set in the form-based code, but how each individual developer would propose to you to do that would be, down the road, and you'd be judging that between the applicant and yourselves.
Okay?
And you're hired for proofreading, but
Yeah.
I think you got a future there. Commissioner Kalis.
Thank you, Chairman. First thing I was going to say is thank you, Commissioner Yednick, for your eye of detail. I didn't catch any of that stuff, so definitely appreciate that. And I think it's a good point that we want to present ourselves favorably to, suitors, as it were. So thank you for your willingness to work on that. I guess since we were talking about that property, that's Area 6, the one right across the street. Is it? Okay, so that's. So in situations like that where, the village might own some of the land, but not all of it, and, there's a lot of different constituents on that whole stretch of land. If everyone's not in agreement, and you were to, I think you mentioned, like, sometimes you build part of it with the idea that in the future, the other part will be acquired, and then you can kind of build block A, and then 5 years later, build block B. Does it look weird? Like, if they build half of it, assuming that the other half is going to be ours someday, you know what I mean? Like, you want the whole thing, but if you can only get half at a time, it's kind of just in your experience. Yeah, so if you only got the right side because, the developers that have come here don't want to agree to us, what sort of experience do you have with that?
That's one of the reasons that past projects have not gone through.
Right.
Because they didn't have all the property. They had ideas like this.
Yeah.
Going all the way up to the post office, but.
So is the trouble that developer couldn't acquire the rest of the whole stretch and it wasn't cohesive? Is that kind of the history of?
Yeah.
I vaguely remember a few. I mean, it's gone back along several years now, so. I'm just curious, like, in the whole phases kind of thing, what if it happened that you did half and half is this new looking thing where the buildings are straight to the street and the other half isn't, sort of?
Well, what I would say is, most urbanism happens in phases and increments. Rarely is a place all built at one time in one style by one hand. So what's nice about this is if you adopt the regulations and only the western half is built, in the near term, and you're waiting a few years, what's nice is the regulations assure you that when it is done, they will match.
Okay.
So, and then the other thing to say is the first phase is done in the pedestrian, friendly way that you want in a transit center. So it's powerful. This one's powerful on a couple of levels, but to establish that as a pattern in Wheeling would be a really powerful signal to the market. Because I think the signals that the zoning code has sent unintentionally is a kind of oddball thing. Because the rest of the world in a TOD says, build at the back of the sidewalk, make it a nice thing, and to have this big new facilities coming up over here behind a surface parking lot is like, OMG, please. So this one would get it right, and it'll happen over time. So
Do villages have to do this kind of stuff through eminent domain, or is that not really how that's done?
Don't have to.
well, this one, I think I mean the east parcel.
Yeah.
It could come to that. I will just say, I want to say I've probably worked with 50 municipalities, and eminent domain has been used once.
Okay.
People are understandably really skittish about doing it. Sometimes in negotiations, there'll be the threat of it. So, well, if we don't come to terms, we've always got that power, but no one really wants to exercise it. It's painful, it's litigious, it's expensive, but it could come to that. Because I don't remember the particulars of who those parcels were.
2 houses.
Boris, is that his name? What's his name? Boris?
Some of the challenge, the ultimate challenge here is the multiple ownerships.
Yeah, right.
The village does hold ownership of one pivotal parcel kind of in between these. In terms of moving forward, what we would ideally use the plan for is to work with the developer to say, here's the vision. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly like this, but here's the vision. If you build the western half, we want to make sure that what you do on the western half will allow for the continuation of that.
Sure.
That may not come for another few years,
Yeah.
but what we don't want to do is not have a plan.
Yeah.
Western half gets developed with the total disregard to the remaining eastern portion. Having a plan allows us to put those pieces together. It's a puzzle. You
Yeah.
have all the individual pieces, you put it together, and you have this nice picture. And that's what Doug and Tim have done, is show us the final, when you put all the pieces together.
Yeah.
And so now what the village has is that end goal, so we can work with current owners and future owners to say, if you want to develop this and you only have 2 parcels, what we really want you to do is assemble the remaining parcels, and we can work with you to get to this end point.
Sure.
So it's that incentive tool as well, to incentivize a developer to say, if you can assemble all this, and this is the end goal that we'd like to work with you on.
Yeah, great. And I think having this plan as a marketing piece might encourage the property owners to buy in, because they're like, oh, that would be very cool. You know, I'm more willing to part way with the press side.
Yeah, and I was just to answer your question about eminent domain, on the eastern parcel, we had talked about this idea that if all you did was claim, or, use eminent domain on the north edge of the site to get a street or access, a rear access across those parcels, if there were holdouts in the middle, the people that have access to that new street can do a development, and the holdouts can still be holdouts, and you haven't really affected their, in fact, arguably you could say you had improved the value of all of the parcels, holdouts and not, by doing that. So it's a little more publicly defensible use of eminent domain to provide access.
Okay, that was one of my specific questions, that road in the back. I love this idea of this whole thing, but there's three people and 3 property owners involved, and if you build half of that, like, it'd be weird, just draw, on the western half, build a dead-end street, but if you got the eminent domain and were able to go all the way through, that would make sense. Okay. Cool. Just wanted clarity on that. We're looking at it every night, so it's,
I was going to say the other, short of an eminent domain, would be negotiating an easement. So you don't have to own the land to have a path across it, so.
Okay.
By the way, that north end is in a floodplain anyways, so it's a little easier to.
So that dovetails into my next point about the Buffalo Creek, which is not the wheeling drainage ditch, right? I love the idea of like a creek walk. I know a lot of it is you can't even develop on the land because the land is not suitable for building, and there's stuff on Milwaukee that's the same way. And if we could, for what it's worth, I'd like to say that I would love to make it, like you said, a destination where we're known for our awesome creek walk. It's not this drainage ditch that's ugly and just an eyesore, and it's, in the middle of everything. Make it so there's actually a walking path or something where you can actually make it, like Naperville River Walk or something like, like that. Obviously, we'll see what happens there, but I love the idea of making it an actual destination instead of, just being embarrassed by it in our village. So, same way with art on the buildings. I love that idea. Again, this is just kind of, we're not, so you mentioned that this plan does not cite specific businesses that you're suggesting. It's just building formation ideas, and because we were talking about Topgolf, and I'm like, well, we're not there yet, right? Like we're not even, so one of my questions is, as consultants, how far, and we can talk to John Malanofi, obviously, and staff, about economic development of what we would like to see, but how far down this road do you guys go with a village as far as, like, if we adopt this plan and then we start actually building it, are you still with us of like working with courting businesses to come in, developers, or is it kind of, where does your piece end in this whole plan?
I was going to say Bridget Lane from BDI, who is one of our team members, does do business recruitment. We haven't talked about it with Steve as scope, but that's a service that she provides. But we also like to say our best projects are long-term collaborations with towns. The longest would be 20 years with the town of Normal, 10 years with the town of Mundelein, just, project after project, hey, can you help us with this? So we really do like those long-term partnerships.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking economically and whatnot in the future of like who I would like to see. And I don't know if we're going to have a chance as the commission to say that, except for on a private basis with staff or John or you guys, and make suggestions or go and talk to businesses ourselves, as just volunteers. And, if we know a business owner, like I go to Arlington Heights for a co-working space because we don't have one here. I would love that concept near a train station. I think that'd be awesome. I just don't know what the avenue for me as a resident or a plan commissioner to kind of suggest those things once the plan is adopted, like specifically how does the plan work from there?
Yeah. So I was going to say there's two or three comments just to make generally. If you remember, this was an update to the 2004 TOD plan, and it was, as Tim referenced, it was very specific and said you'll have this many square feet of this and this many square feet of that. And then the recession happened and none of it made any sense. It had a shelf life of about 3 years. And then, 5 or 10 years later, it was useless. And so we have, you could say we've gotten smarter in the sense that, the future happens and markets change.
Yeah.
Bridget's economic analysis is really severe when you read it. It's like people don't stop at stores anymore, they shop online.
Yeah.
Your most viable category is often food, and even that is getting pinched to be this sort of grab and go food. So, you're lucky that you have the town center with nice restaurants in it opening up, but so there are a lot of doors that seem to be closing right now in terms of viable land uses. And so that's one thing I think we've made the right judgment to not call out specific this and specific that, because it wouldn't age. Second thing is the development community likes predictability. So when you've adopted the form-based code and then put the word out that what we're interested in here is a good walkable form, all the developers that are in your town work in other towns and can do walkable when you ask them to do it. You've just never asked them to do it, so they don't do it here.
Okay.
So once you start asking, they'll start showing up and doing it and say, you're going to take your place, alongside a Naperville or alongside a place that's got a kind of walkable expectation. So the quality will go up when you adopt it. So emphasis of form over use, and the market decides. And then the third thing I was going to say was, there are specific opportunities to market plans like this. One is the ICSC, the International Council of Shopping Centers, which has a Chicago-based conference. I want to say it's in October. And then there's a big one I've never been to in Las Vegas in March. And so if you see somebody doing a junket to Las Vegas in March, and the reason they have to go to Las Vegas in March is to market your plan, there's some truth to that. And then there's another organization, Urban Land Institute. So those are the two kind of places where developers convene to kind of, you could pitch deals in those two places, or you could send a consultant or delegate to those two places. Glad to talk with Steve about that.
Okay. Totally unrelated. I was just flipping through another edit for when you go back. On the acknowledgements page, it says James Rufato is a plan commissioner. He is now a trustee. So just as far as the people, the steering committee, just another edit there. I want to give respect to trustee Rufato now. And we miss him, although Chairman Johnson has done admirably. You had mentioned, you'd said high priority projects, plural, but then you only said 6. Number 6 is the high priority. Are there other high priority projects? Or did I hear you wrong? Or did I just not pay attention and that there was another high priority one?
Number 7.
Or was it 7? Maybe I'm... So what are the high priority projects in your mind, just to clarify?
Yeah, so the first one is this property across the street. The mid-block crosswalks is probably a hard and painful one, but a very important one.
Got it.
The Collins one, that's kind of a low-hanging fruit because the village owns that building already. It's just kind of what to do with it. I say this, it also is challenging. We think it's a really great idea to make a strong connection through there with some sort of right-of-way to get to the train station. It may not be the most beautiful thing for now because there's like the overhead power lines and stuff. We're showing it as though it's this array of trees. But the reality is there's power lines. So, but in the meantime, if there were just even a way to get there, but in the long term to make sort of a landscape, almost like a linear park sort of thing, I could see that. But that's a project, somehow. And I think that goes hand in hand with the whole Ozinga kind of redevelopment, But the project of Ozinga is that first word, relocate. Just work with them somehow to get that land to be able to use something other than industrial.
Okay, I just hadn't seen that subject, the topic at the top, so I apologize for that. That's,
Sure.
You don't need to belabor that. you did glaze over the mid-block crosswalks, which has been a point of contention for me as far as traffic here. Like, I like the idea that you can cross Dundee. Can you speak again to what that's going to do for traffic?
Yeah, so in this case, we're not eliminating any lanes at all, ever,
Right.
in this plan. All we're doing is, there's places here where there's actually not a stacking lane for turning, and that's the moment where you would put the mid-block pedestrian crossing there.
Is it, like, so traffic's always coming west at rush hour, right? And there's stacks of cars over here every day. Is the idea that cars would be stopped and then people could go through, or people go through and they make cars stop? Is that, like, what is the point? These crosswalks, do pedestrians have the ability to stop traffic coming through?
They should, because they have this thing, it's called a hawk signal.
Yeah,
And-
when they're present, it flashes.
Yeah, and that's just because IDOT now, they have rules of where they're going to, when they allow a crosswalk, you
Yeah.
got to have the hawk signal.
Yeah.
And so in that case, when they push the button, cars should stop.
Yeah.
I've seen them, a lot of times they don't, but they should.
Yeah, I just, again, I'm beating this over, dead horse here, but making traffic worse on Dundee is, problematic for our village. So, although it'd be nice to be able to cross Dundee and make it walkable.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge.
It's a challenge.
Oh yeah, the trail-oriented development, I love that term, the article that you shared, that's what I think that's a cool idea for the creek. That's it for me, as if that wasn't enough. Thank you.
Looks like you wanted to say something.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, with permission, my wife has requested I go home. And so you're in good hands with Tim, and if you have other questions, Tim can answer them. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you were all set?
I'm done.
Mr. Blanova.
We can call him on his phone in case you have questions for him.
Okay. We can call his wife.
That too.
I'll make it easy. I don't have any questions. Just want to say thank you.
And Commissioner Sprague.
I do have one question. And forgive me if this has been covered before. I haven't been here, so. Do you know if IDOT will allow any of these proposed crosswalks on Dundee?
Well, we don't see any reason why they wouldn't. So unfortunately, Kelly's not here. She's with Sam Swartz Engineers, and what they do is they deal with IDOT as a living, like that's what they do. And, there's a process that would be initiated by the village to get that going. But what we've shown here is following their most recent requirements, all of their rules. So technically, it's possible. And IDOT is constant, every time I come out here, they're out here doing something new. So it wouldn't be, I think, out of the realm of possibilities at all to have these. And like I said, the first ones that we proposed, we were a little less ambitious. We had just one over there by the train tracks, and in that case, part of it was even working with the fire chief to make sure that we're putting these things in a place that he felt were safe. And he made a very wise point where at one point we're just looking at a plan, right? It's two-dimensional. How about here? He says, well, you got to remember, the road slopes up there. So if I'm coming, I can't see what's on the other side. So that's why we realized that to put it at a high point makes sense versus like at a low point where somebody might have been coming over and not find that. So we're pretty happy with the proposed locations here, but in the end of the day, there's a process to go through with IDOT as well. Yeah.
Right, and what happens to your access plans if they don't allow them?
Well, I think that these are things that you keep them in mind and you keep fighting for them. And eventually, I think that people turn over in the IDOT world as well, and eventually you get what you want, hopefully. But I just wouldn't give up on it. I think that's one of the comments we made on there. It's not easy, but fight for those crosswalks. It's always the hardest thing with state jurisdiction streets and getting crosswalks and any kind of changes to the right-of-way. It's the hardest part of planning, but it's so important for the walkable.
Sorry, Tim, there's a variety of elements that come into play when you talk about an IDOT governed road. The first step is for a municipality, for us to have a plan that shows a vision of what we would like to improve on with pedestrian access as it relates to Dundee. So the first kind of step is to create that plan. Here's what we'd like to do with this. The next step is work with IDOT. That may escalate to having to do some additional studies. And then from the studies, having to then go through the IDOT review channels to make sure that maybe there's a improvement project they have in an intersection where we can piggyback off of that. So there's a series of, it's kind of a dominoes. If you click the one, then they start to fall. Now, maybe not very easily over time and maybe at added expense. So what we have here is we have a plan that has identified areas where we can add these and they are logical. What we then have to do is take that and say, how important is that to the village? And does the village want to go through that process to work off of what we have identified here to see if that is a goal that we want to achieve as part of this plan? And it won't happen overnight, but again, the first stepping point is to have something. Right now, the village really, the current plan that we have, the existing stationary plan doesn't really talk about pedestrian access, improving pedestrian connectivity, things of that nature. This plan focuses on that. So this is a first step in many phases is to at least identify the need and identify some locations and methods of how to do that. And that gives us a starting point to at least work from, whereas before we didn't really have anything.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
And many times, I've seen developers work around existing curb cuts so they don't have to go to IDOT and ask to move the driveway 30 feet. They'll build their design around where there's already an approved driveway. Okay. In one or two of the earlier discussions, they talked about narrowing the lanes on Dundee Road as a way of controlling speed.
That, I'll flip back to this one that shows the street sections. The place where we show that is here, only because in order to get the mid-block pedestrian crossing to fit, that would have to narrow the lanes. Right now, they're about 12 feet or so, and 11 feet is still awfully wide. So to do that, if you narrow them down to about 11 feet, then you could probably get this. But again, this is one where Kelly wasn't so sure, so we showed two. We showed like a backup scenario in that case. But here, we're actually leaving the lanes. The lanes could stay the same width, or actually, let me correct that. Here we have a shoulder striped. So we do take a little bit out in order to get the lanes down to 11 feet. Now, you're right, that's a good point. We prefer the 11-foot lanes because it gets cars to travel this, at least more likely they'll go the posted speed limit is what we want.
If they could stay in the lanes too, but people tend to wander, and taking any cushion away is a concern.
Yeah, and there's trucks and everything. It just seems like the 12-foot lanes seem like an invitation for people to drive faster than they should.
Well, not at 6 o'clock. Okay. It seems like there are some spots along Dundee that are narrower already. So that would have to be looked at closely. I think at this point, I mean, there were some liberties taken, like carving up existing businesses like Stasic Chevrolet and putting in new things. Obviously, that would not happen very quickly, I don't think. Okay, that's really all I had. So we are looking for a motion to recommend approval to replace the current 2004 station area plan with the downtown station area plan update, a transit-oriented development plan to guide development around the metro station. That is docket number 2019-18. Do we have any conditions that would apply to this?
I don't think it's a condition, but we'll work with Tim's team to go through and do a reread and clear up any of the.
Yeah, that was the only condition I was thinking of too.
Yeah, I think we'll just work we'll just work on that. I don't feel like it's something that has to be incorporated into a condition.
And this will go to the board at some point?
The next available meeting date would be September 16th, so just pending availability, but that's what we would target at that point.
It'd be nice to get it all cleaned up by then. All right, so do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Blanova, Commissioner Kalis. Roll call.
Commissioner Blanova?
Yes?
Commissioner Kalis votes yes. Commissioner Creech?
Yes.
Commissioner Yednick?
Yes, thanks for the new format.
Commissioner Sprague?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Chairman Johnson?
Yes. And do we need, this is a public hearing, right? So we need to close it?
Close, yes.
So I need a motion to close the
So
public
moved.
hearing on this.
Second.
Commissioner Kalis, Commissioner Blanova.
Do we need roll call?
Do we need,
No, you
this
do
is voice vote?
Voice.
No, voice is fine.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right. All your work
Thank
has
you very much.
has
Thank
gotten
you.
you to the next level anyways. Next up is approval of minutes for August 8th, 2019, including findings for docket number 2019-9. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We got one.
Yednick and
And Creech.
Creech. Roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Blanova?
Yes.
Commissioner Yednick?
Yes.
Sorry. Commissioner Creech?
Yes.
Commissioner Blanova votes yes. Commissioner Kalis votes yes. Commissioner Sprague?
I abstain, I was not here for
Okay.
for that.
And that would be an abstain. Commissioner Thompson?
Abstain as well.
Chairman Johnson?
Yes. Okay, other business. Ms. Nice, anything for other business from you?
Nope, nothing.
Okay. Steve Robles?
We had mentioned, or Chairman Johnson, you had mentioned, once we have a full plan commission back and assembled, convening to do another orientation by the staff and by Ms. Maluzzi. And so we're targeting the September meeting date right now. We will confirm that as we get a little bit closer, but just for the plan commissions, just to keep in the back of your mind, well, that's what we're looking at right now, is the first meeting in September for the plan commission, pending any major projects that come through at that time or whatever. But right now, it's looking like that's where we.
Would this be in lieu of the agenda, or?
We will probably still have an agenda. We still have a few consent items that we would address, and then we would just keep the meeting open and just conduct an open orientation workshop.
Here or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So, like, as I mentioned, we'll confirm that as we get a little bit closer, but just wanted to put that on your radar in case there's maybe any potential conflicts that we'd like to know about.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Thompson, any other business that you'd like to bring up?
No.
Well, welcome aboard. Commissioner Creech?
I have nothing, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Yednick?
Welcome to new members. Thanks for stepping forward.
Commissioner Sprague?
Yes, I'd like to thank President Horker and the Board of Trustees for having the confidence to appoint me to this commission. I'm proud to serve this community, and I thank you very much.
Commissioner Blanova?
Thank you. I also want to welcome new commissioners and to say that I've been here for 3 years, and it's very exciting to be here, and you will see things that it's just amazing. It was never boring here. So it's awesome that there are more people now, and you're welcome. Thank you.
Commissioner Kalis?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Sprague, Commissioner Thompson, for volunteering for the village. It's always exciting to see what's up ahead for where we're living, and glad to be a part of it. So thank you guys for being part of it as well. Glad we're finally a fearsome seven agains.
Magnificent.
It's been a while. Magnificent seven. I'd like to thank, just on a personal front, the Park District for another amazing summer series of concerts at Heritage Park. Went to the International Fest, which was fantastic, and we always enjoy the concerts there. So if anyone doesn't know about the free concert series that they do in the summer, they are amazing. That whole area is just phenomenal. I'm proud to be a Wheeling resident because of what they've done over there, and great for kids, great for families. So sad to see that close for the season, but thankful. and looking forward to another one. So that's it.
Thank you. And I have nothing else. Mallory, anything?
Nothing else, no.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Kalis, Commissioner Creech, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Who doesn't want to go home?